Now, this movie is like if Gaspard Noé did a prequel to 28 Days Later and shot it like a third person version of the music video Smack My Bitch Up. Like, take that in for a second. That's a lot to take in. That's a weird mix of shit. But that is what MadS is. Okay? This dropped on Shudder recently to a lot of fanfare, and I can see why, because it's a bloody drug fueled ride that is supposedly shot in one take. And even though there's some debate online whether or not it is, it looks like it is. Regardless of whether it was or not, it looks like it was shot in one take, and that is fun. And this is a fun movie. Like, I actually did enjoy the hell out of this movie. Now, I don't want to derail the hype train behind this film because, like I said, I really do like it. But I do want to manage expectations a bit because I think I've seen a lot of the negative stuff I've seen online is because people have heard that it's a masterpiece and it's never been done before, and this is the first one like it. Blah blah. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a really really good movie. Like, this is a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. But this is like a stylish, cooler but less hardcore version of the Taiwanese film The Sadness, which is another film I really liked. If these two were cousins going on a night out, Mads would be in like a white linen shirt, really low, like probably unbuttoned to the navel with like a slight dusting of cocaine mustache, and looking to punch on with randoms. Like, that's the vibe. The Sadness would be in like a super worn graphic tee with like ripped jeans and shit, looking to stab someone in an alley and fuck the wound. Right? Like, this has been done before in a more hardcore way, by The Sadness, but don't let that like stop you from watching this film, because the way it is shot is fairly novel in horror, although we do have a few one take films. But the execution is cool, and it's a little novel for horror, and while the plot has definitely been done, this is a really engaging and psychedelic look at what would happen if virulent psychosis was unleashed on the world, basically. And I do think it's worth your time for that. If you like this, and you're like, oh, I wish I could find more movies that are like this, just skip to the end, because as I do in all my reviews, I've picked two that are the same vibe that I think you'll like. Now, this movie starts with coked up rich kid Romain driving home from his drug dealer's house. He finds a woman covered in bandages who's obviously having a fucking bad time. Even though he'd rather be like sucking his teeth and talking about businesses he's never going to start with his other coked up buddies, Romain's a fairly decent human and decides to take her to the hospital. She repays him by basically mutilating herself on the front seat, leaving Romain with one of the worst drive homes I've seen in horror since fucking Hereditary. Like, the drive home, you could really feel it. I was like, oh god, this is going to get pretty crazy. And it does. However, Romain, because of his lifestyle, he's planned to go out partying tonight for his birthday with his girlfriend, fling, fuck buddy, Anna. And her and her friends do not take no for answers. It's actually one of the most annoying parts of this movie, is them constantly beeping their fucking horns out the front of his place. When he goes out, however, he starts to see and feel and hear things that he can't explain. And we basically get to watch as we'd wished that he'd stayed home and played Stardew Valley, because it gets crazy. This film does get crazy. It gets quite anxiety inducing. It is also incredibly engaging, right? Like, this only goes for about 90 minutes, 80, 90 minutes. And after the first 10 minutes, it just zips by. Every time I thought I was going to get bored, like there would be a scene that would just keep dragging on, I thought, just before I was just starting to think, okay, I'm a little bit sick of this scene, something interesting would happen, and that would like reset the countdown clock on my attention span. Like, it's really good at that. This is also probably the most stylish film I've seen this year besides The Substance. It doesn't have too much to say in terms of story, but it does a really good job at portraying the lives of these like drug-fueled rich kids in a way that makes you kind of fucking hate them, but not enough to want them to die, right? That is a very hard knife edge to do, and this movie does that really well. The acting by Laury Pavy, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, I apologize, but who played Anna, fucking really good. She is really good. She has to do a lot of emotional outbursting and physical tics. They work really well in a film that is supremely light on dialogue. So she really carried, I think, in this one. Milton Riche as Romaine, suitably believable in the role of like daddy's little fuck up. There was, as I was watching this, all I could think was, fuck, this would have been the most annoying movie of all time to shoot, right? The constant panning and construction of shots must have been an absolute fucking nightmare. But it does look like it's done in one take. The director, David Moreau, has said that it was done in one take. He said he tried 4 times to do it, but something fucking happened every time. So on the 5th, like, go of it, he managed to do the whole thing in one take. I'll believe him. I'm happy to believe him. You know, I think that's cool for the film. I'm not a technical cinematographer, so I can't tell. You know, there are some points where you could have cut it up theoretically, but I'm not going to say much on that. I think it's fucking cool. Regardless, it looks fucking sick, and that's all I really give a shit about. The way it's shot puts you in like a video game mindset, right? You're following Romaine, and you're like, okay, this is our main character, right? Here is for this part of the story our main character, and then the movie seamlessly like peels off and starts following another character, and you instantly go, okay, now this is our main character. Forget about that. Now this is our main character. It's really good at that. It is really, and it's really good for the type of movie this is, because the camera is passed on like a disease. Really clever. It's a very fun storytelling mechanic, and they do it fairly seamlessly. The scenes where the characters are having a bad trip are fucking claustrophobic and panic-inducing, which is exactly what the director wanted, I imagine. So he smashed that out of the park, because there were some scenes where I was like, Jesus, man, you need to go home. You shouldn't be at this party. You need to go home. Also, the house, if you're a little Grand Designs baby, if you love watching that shit or like looking at fancy houses, the fucking houses in this movie are absolutely stunning. Less than 1% of the people on Earth would be able to afford these houses or even be in these houses, but god damn, are there some amazing houses in this movie. They also nail the feeling of leaving a party kind of fucked up. Like, when a character leaves a party, it feels like exactly the times I've been absolutely fucking munted and walking home from a party by myself and just been like, you know, it's really good. They nail that vibe really well. There's not a lot of plot in this movie, but the plot that you do get is told to you through like contextual clues, and there's somewhat of like an audio diary going on. It's a bit like picking up audio recordings in something like BioShock or Alien Isolation. That works for me. I like that stuff. Or Doom. Doom does it pretty well. I like that stuff. I know that'll piss some people off, but it worked for me. I was fine with it. I don't need too much crazy story. There were a few pieces of the film I didn't love. One was because of how it's shot, and there are scenes of like bike riding and scooter riding and cars and stuff like that. And it's probably just because this is the only way they could have done it in one take, but the camera does jolt around a bit. For some people, that actually might add to the movie. That's good, I guess. But for me, I was like, it did feel a bit world starry at points. There's a lot of distance covered and like a lot of like, whoa. So, you know, that really minor for me. Another thing is that this movie's about like annoying, hysterical people at a party who are drunk or high. That is part of the symptoms of the virulence, is increased emotional outburst. So, you know, if you've ever had to look after a drunk mate or a high mate at a party who is crying and having a fucking meltdown, half the film is basically that. And there are touches that get a little bit old. Like, there are where I'm just like, yeah, I get it. Stop screaming. Stop, that can be a little bit old, and I am sure I'm not the only one who found some of that grating. That being said, if you like violent, bloody, and psychedelic stuff, though, this movie has you covered on all those bases, especially if you like found footage horror. I think this is one of the better found footages I've seen in the last couple of years. I probably only need to watch it once, but I'm very glad I did, and I do think it's really worth the 80, 90-minute investment. I think it's a really interesting film. It's very stylish. Even though the plot's not really intense or new in any way, shape, or form, but it's a fucking fun one. I highly recommend watching this if you love psychedelic and violent horror films. Infinity Pool, Mandy, that sort of thing. This would fit in a triple bill with those very well. If you love found footage films, enough said, this is one of the better ones. If you're willing to forgive some technical drops if a movie's trying something a little different, right? The most recent thing I can think of that does that is like Asriel or Skinamarink. Like, they're a bit experimental, so you forgive them a little bit more. If you're like that, I'll forgive something a bit more if it's trying something new. MadS does that. I don't recommend watching this if you struggle with substance abuse issues or have a history of people, like a family that struggle with substance abuse issues. There's a lot of fucking drugs going around this. They're a main part of it. So, that might be very testing for you. Just letting you know going in. Be safe. If you need to love characters to love a movie, I don't. Like, I loved Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. You probably won't love any of the characters in this movie. They're all kind of fuckheads. If you struggle with subtitles, this is French. It's great, but it's, I know that some people struggle to read subtitles. Probably stay away from this one. If you like this movie and you're looking for another movie that is basically about a bad night out, I highly recommend the 2024 Australian indie horror film Bird Eater. It's about a couple who get married and decide to have like a conjoined bucks party and hens night in like a rural Australian cottage. As they get more and more drunk and high, sort of emotions flare, and you get to see how ugly toxic relationships can get, whether that's romantic or friendships. And it's just really good at examining like the horrible shit young men, especially young Australian men, do to each other in the name of bucks party tradition. I really liked it, even though it's not like sci-fi like MadS is. It's a really straight up people being awful and manipulative because of substance and alcohol. And there are multiple scenes in MadS that reminded me of Bird Eater. So if you like it, I think you'll probably like Bird Eater. It's not as crazy, but it is all about that like hysterical people just being fucking awful to each other, and it's a good one. It's a good one. Another one I mentioned before, but The Sadness. If you like this, go see The Sadness. It's a 2021 Taiwanese film. It's about a zombie outbreak that basically turns people into like violent rapists. Unlike MadS, you actually like the characters. Like there's a couple that I just truly adored in it. Be warned though, it is very graphic and it is super hardcore, right? Like it is one of the more full-on films I think I've ever watched. It's really great. It's got a really great villain in it, but it is extremely disturbing. So if that is your type, there's lots of splatter, there's lots of sexual violence, but it does similar themes to MadS. It's fucking good. But if that is your type of film, like if you like disturbing, violent films, definitely see The Sadness. It's pretty hard to pass up. I think I liked it more than MadS just because I liked the characters a bit more. Although like I said before, MadS is definitely the cooler film, like the more stylish film. But there are some really heartbreaking parts in The Sadness. So if you have seen it or you go and watch it after this, fucking let me know what you think, because I really enjoyed it. If you saw MadS, let me know what you think. Is it in your top 10? I know a lot of people are like, this is the best film I've seen this year. It's fucking cool that, in basically end of October into November, we're still getting films that are vying for the top spot this year. I fucking love that shit. If you have any films that you're like, hey man, you haven't covered these, they came out this year, you need to see them before you do your top 10 list, let me know in the comments. Go to the community page. I've got a post there for it. I'm trying to compile everything I might have missed this year and see it before I do my end of year list, so I can get like an accurate lay of the land. So I do have some more to cover, but yeah, chuck them to me. As always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that shit. All the YouTube stuff. I appreciate the hell out of you all, and hopefully I'll see you next week for another review. Peace.